Hello and welcome to Who's the Bossk? It's a Star Wars podcast from laughingplace.com. My name is Mike Celestino. I am your host. I am the lead Southern California reporter and editorial director for Star Wars content at Laughing Place. This is episode number 144. Gross. That's a gross number of episodes, if you ask me. Math joke, sorry. And we are going to be discussing the Mandalorian, the latest episode of The Mandalorian, and the latest episode of The Bad Batch this week. And for that discussion, I have invited back on the show the co-founder of Laughing Place and my friend Rebecca Mosley. Rebecca, thank you for coming back on the show. How are you? What have you been up to?
I'm doing well. I've been doing a lot of traveling. Hit Walt Disney World for a little bit. Got to experience the Disney Wish. Beautiful cruise ship. I'm in love. And then took a slight detour to Disneyland for a very rainy day. And home now. Yay!
That's awesome. Yeah, you've been out down in the southeast part of the country and beyond. Tell me a little bit about the Disney Wish. And I have to ask about the hyperspace lounge, what you thought about that. But
Okay.
what was your trip like in general?
Yeah, overall, the Disney Wish is beautiful. My caveat on that is that it's not as easy to feel like you're on a cruise as previous Disney ships. Other Disney ships, I found kind of that promenade where you're, walking along with the ocean breezes, much more easy to access. Whereas the Wish is much more like a really fancy hotel on the water. So it's a different vibe, but I
Okay.
did like it. As to the hyperspace lounge, okay, it is exquisite in its execution. I mean, you are stepping into that Star Wars universe. I love that. But my caveat on it is it's not what I want when I'm on a cruise. It felt more like something I might find, a space I might find aboard the Millennium Falcon
Okay.
versus a space I would find on that really fancy barge we saw, or fancy locations we saw in Solo. It
Okay.
and I think that's more about the audio sounds. They try to create the ambiance of Star Wars through a lot of like audio cues, and it gave it more of an industrial feel
Hmm.
than an elegance. So
Okay.
that was surprising to me. My drink was fantastic. I don't remember what it was, but it was wonderful. It was
You
one of
didn't
those.
get the one that comes in the Camptono, did you? The
I did not. I did not
$10,000.
spend the
Oh,
5K
it's
for
5,000.
the Camtono beverage, but my drink, um, they actually, I think she could tell I was a nerd because she presented it to me with this smoke bubble that wasn't really listed with my drink. It was listed with other drinks, but I think she could tell that I was really geeking out. So she actually gave me that little bit of presentation beauty as well. But it was one of those drinks that would kick your butt if you're not paying attention because the
Hmm.
alcohol doesn't come in, that kind of kick doesn't come into later. So I could see myself having a few of those and then being like, whoa, okay, that just kicked me hard. So,
Right.
but I like,
Yeah, I mean, it sounds pretty cool. Would you compare it to what you've seen of the Sublight Lounge at the Galactic Star Cruiser, or different vibe than that?
to me, I haven't been to the Sublight, but based on what I've seen of it, this to me is more Oga's Cantina,
Okay.
less Sublight.
Okay.
Because and I haven't been in Sublight, but Sublight to me feels like a little bit of an elevated experience as compared to like kind of the rusticy nature of
Right.
Oga's. So Doobie had
Also
a
the
blue. By the way, Doobie was with me for that, and he
yeah.
had a blue drink. One
Okay.
one of the cute elements of this, Mike, is the way that the ship is designed. The kids zone is directly beneath the hyperspace lounge. And so as the kids are playing in that Star Wars themed area,
Yeah.
they're told that their actions are impacting what's happening to us upstairs.
Really? Is that
Okay,
true?
so the kids downstairs are pushing buttons and stuff and sending us to various planets. And then if they go visit the space lounge, they'll see that various planets are happening on screen. So the storyline is that, they're impacted.
Oh.
So it's really sweet at dinner one of our dining companions had been playing down there, and she asked me if I'd been in the lounge, and I told her, yeah. And we went to various planets. She goes, I made that happen. I was pushing the buttons. I was the one sending you to all the planets. And so it was really sweet.
That's awesome. I didn't know about that connection to the kids' play area. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about a comparison to is I've been on the Disney Fantasy, one of the other cruise ships, and they have a bar called Skylines, I think, that
Yes.
every few minutes it changes the skyline of the city that you're looking out onto. And I know that the Hyperspace Lounge will change the planet that you're looking out onto. But you said this felt a little bit more what was the word that you use? Like it was
Industrial.
industrial, yeah. So that the Skyline Lounge did feel a little fancier to me. So would you say that's accurate? Yeah.
I 100% agree with you. When you're in Skyline Lounge, you're looking out on this elegant skyscape. The menus are this really fancy kind of illuminated menu, whereas these honestly are just decorated iPads.
Okay.
When you're to the point where somebody had pushed the wrong button on ours, and I had to fish around to find the menu again on my iPad that was at my table. And the way the transformation happens when you're in Skyline, you may recall, it's kind of almost like Tinkerbell Pixie Dust kind of covers the screen, and there's this melodic,
Yes.
fanciful tone. Whereas at hyperspace, obviously they do hyperspace, right? So you get the whoosh and the streaming light by you, very similar
Yeah.
to, what happens when the Millennium Falcon jumps into hyperspace. So yeah, so it doesn't, like I say, it doesn't have that same kind of, I don't know, there's lots of like
Yeah.
gurgling sounds and stuff. It was just not what I expected,
Okay.
but totally immersed in that universe. It is very weird to be in the grand hall of the ship and have that door slide open, and then it's just like, wow, okay, I am somewhere totally different. It's super
Nice.
cool.
Yeah, it sounds cool. I think I would get a kick out of it. I hope I get to see it someday. We are recording live on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. Let's take some comments that we've already gotten from Kiki and Luca. Said, hi, guys. That was a weird episode. We are going to be talking about both the episodes that came out this week, Bad Batch and The Mandalorian. I'm not sure which you're referring to. Probably The Mandalorian. Doobie loved my joke.
Of
And
course.
Alexander... Alexander said hi Alexander Lee, and then Richard Broadway said hi as well. He's got he or she has this Sonic the Hedgehog avatar there. Okay, let's get into the 5 Star Wars questions. So this is your first time on the show this season. For season 4, you're up to level 4 of the 5 Star Wars questions. Are you ready for these, Rebecca?
I think so.
Okay. It's got trickier. I think it got a little trickier this season. So I gave you in advance. I hope they weren't too much of a stumper for you. But
Yeah.
we'll get started here. Number 1, the 5 Star Wars questions, level 4. What is your favorite Star Wars weapon? And the caveat here is if you're selecting a lightsaber or a blaster, please be specific as to its model or owner. What do you think, Rebecca?
Okay, this was super tough for me.
Yeah.
Super tough. Because I have often spoken of how my love for Star Wars really can be boiled down to a singular moment. And that is when Leia grabs that blaster rifle from the men who are saving her and pretty much says,
Oh,
y'all are blowing it. I'm going to take advantage of this and I'm going to save our skins. And so there's part of me that wants to choose that blaster rifle.
yeah, but that's just like a stormtrooper blaster, right?
Exactly,
Rifle, right? Yeah.
exactly. And then I'm thinking of her various pistols, like the one she's got hold under her arm when she's sitting
Yeah.
outside at Endor. So that one kind of, and then when we see her lightsaber in Rise of Skywalker, so I was really torn on wanting to select one of Leia's weapons, but ultimately, Mike, I'm gonna have to go with a gaffy stick from
Okay.
the Sand People.
Interesting.
I was thinking of what would be something that I would love to kind of have like on my wall at some point in my life as a geek. And it is that I love the nature of it being so personal that we saw
Yeah.
within Boba Fett, where he was carving it, and it feels like each one would have its own story if you actually got to examine them. And so yeah, so ultimately that's where I'm going, Mike. Yeah.
You know who's making replicas of the gaffy sticks now?
Yes.
Our friends
Yeah.
over there at Regal Robot. I'm sure they're fairly pricey, but they
Exactly.
are very nice. So
Uh-huh.
maybe someday you'll receive one as a gift. Doobie's watching. Maybe you'll keep that in mind. It seems like a nice gift
I
for
love the
for
idea of having just sitting in a corner, a la the end of Miracle on 34th Street when there's that cane in the corner, kind of
yeah.
just yeah, I love that as an idea. When people walk in my house, I just have this gappy stick kind of leaning over in a corner somewhere.
That's a great choice that we definitely haven't heard before, so I love it. Number 2, the 5 Star Wars questions, level 4. Which Star Wars actor has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars?
I'm cheating.
Okay.
I'm going I'm going with the actor who was a bartender in a cantina on Kijimi, and that would be legendary maestro John Williams.
You know what? That there's nothing in this question that disqualifies because it doesn't say which actor has had your favorite acting career outside of
Correct.
Star Wars. John Williams has acted in Star Wars and he has your favorite career outside of Star Wars. I think that totally qualifies. Talk a little bit about your love of John Williams, why you selected him.
I have worn out soundtracks written by this incredibly creative man, and visited the Hollywood Bowl numerous times, hearing him talk about his creations along with then conducting them right there in the beautiful hills of Hollywood. And yeah, no, I have adored his career over the years. I think for me, I first really became aware of him with Superman, and I loved his use of French horns within that theme. In later years, I discovered that he was actually the mind behind Tom Sawyer musical, which I had adored when I was
Okay.
little and didn't realize that he was connected with.
Hmm.
Now, White E.T., Harry Potter, Midway March, 1941 March, you name it.
Yeah.
Most of my favorite, most played songs on my devices are going to be John Williams.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with John Williams. I was just watching Stephen Colbert had a nice interview with Steven Spielberg and John Williams before the Oscars, and it was really cool just getting to see them both talking together and with each other. But yeah, a huge John Williams fan myself. Doobie said you're going by Kobayashi Maru rules, which is a Star Trek reference, I believe.
Yep, it
Um,
is.
so I am getting back into Star Trek. I think you'll be happy to
I
hear that, Rebecca.
saw.
So
I'm so excited.
the Picard season 3 has really gotten me jazzed about Star Trek, but that's neither here nor there. Let's go into number 3. Which Star Wars director has had your favorite career outside of Star Wars?
Controversial. I was a fan of Rian Johnson's Star Wars film and have also appreciated what he's brought to us outside of the film. Although I wish he didn't have such an obsession with male genitalia. But because it seems to crop up frequently in various projects I've watched of his.
Okay.
But
Try to remember an example of that, but you
oh,
don't need to remind me.
this season of Poker Face
Oh, okay. I haven't
has
watched Poker
has
Face yet.
yeah. But yeah, I he's a little he pushes the edge of where my vulgar line
Mm,
is. But I do really enjoy how he's willing to be absurd.
yeah.
And just to have fun with a story. And I'm enjoying that a lot. I enjoyed it with Glass Onion. I'm enjoying it with some of the episodes within Poker Face, where you're just like, that is completely absurd, but yet it's fun. And I'm right along there with you. And once again, I appreciated where he took us with Luke Skywalker. I know that's controversial, but I liked it.
It is a little controversial, I guess, in the larger Star Wars community, but the right people like The Last Jedi, I think. Anyway, I like Rian Johnson quite a bit too. We just did a whole episode about the movie Brick, his first film, on Who's the Bossk not too long ago. That's probably my favorite movie of his. Have you seen Brick?
I have not. I'm
Oh,
gonna
you
have to.
got you got to check that out.
I've been kind of new to the Rian Johnson world.
Okay, it's very different from Glass Onion and Knives Out. It takes itself a little bit more seriously, but that's kind of what I love about
Mm,
it. That's kind
okay.
of the that's kind of the joke of it, is that it takes itself so seriously, if that makes any sense. But
Okay.
yeah, I recommend Brick. So that's a very good answer, I think. What is your number 4? What is your favorite Star Wars reference or Easter egg in other media?
I enjoyed the fact that Lost writers embraced their Star Wars fandom, and so you had moments like, and I went and dug it up because I wanted to have it correct. With it in Exodus, I want to say it was part 2, when Sawyer and Michael and Jin are on the raft and they're arguing, and Sawyer says, "Hey, Han, you and Chewie want to slow down a second and talk to me here." Just little moments like
Yeah.
that is ultimately kind of what I went with, the various little name drops that happened throughout Lost.
I love that choice. There's a few others I can think of. I think an episode or two before that, when they're building the raft, I think it was either Michael or somebody else says like, "No, no, no, this one goes there,
Yep.
that one goes there," which is a direct quote from The Empire Strikes Back. I know at one point Sawyer calls Hurley Jabba the Hutt, which is probably not a very flattering nickname, but still a Star Wars reference. Then there's that whole episode where they travel back in time to like 1978 or whatever, and Hurley is writing The Empire Strikes Back with his corrections to send to George Lucas.
And he dumps the Ewoks, right?
Right.
I think he even goes into like an reworking ROTJ to
Yeah.
not have Ewoks in it because, according to him, nobody liked Ewoks. So,
Right.
which,
Right.
by the way, I very proudly wore a Wicket T-shirt back in the day. So
Fair.
that was really
Wonderful, fantastic choice. Love Lost. Love the Star Wars references there as well. And then lastly, stepping outside of Star Wars a little bit, what is your favorite Lucasfilm project outside of the Star Wars franchise? It's going to be Indiana Jones, right? Everybody's picking Indiana Jones. Maybe this is a bad question.
I have to imagine it's Indiana Jones. I'm not a Willow. I'm
Yeah.
not a Willow fan. So yeah, I guess I'm also kind of in that. I guess I should have looked more deeply. I bet there's
No.
something else. Maybe you need to rework the question to say,
Yeah.
aside from the Indiana Jones franchise,
Yeah.
what Lucasfilm? But
Well, which
I'm
let's
so
go more granular there. Which of the indie films is your favorite, or
the
the
classic.
TV show? Yeah, Raiders.
Yeah, it's Raiders for me.
Okay.
I love how
Captain
my
EO
husband comes
says
in with
TV.
his favorite Lucasfilm is Captain EO.
Good choice. Good choice. Yeah.
That's my husband.
Okay, that's going to bring us to the end of the 5 Star Wars questions into Star Wars / Lucasfilm headlines this week. And that's, I called it that because the biggest news really that we need to talk about is related to Willow. And that is the fact that the Willow sequel series that was released on Disney Plus has been canceled after 1 season. It's not coming back for anymore, even though it was heavily implied at the end of the season 1 finale that there would be 3 seasons total of the show. It doesn't look like that's going to happen. Rebecca, did you end up watching that whole season?
No, I bailed.
Okay.
I tried. I hadn't watched the original, so I gave it a try because all my team at Laughing Place were Willow fanboys, apparently, who have now grown up. So I thought, well, I'll give it a try. But no, it didn't work for me. Doobie enjoyed it. My husband
Yeah.
enjoyed it, but since I wasn't watching, he kind of let it slide too. I figure he'll catch up at some point. But yeah, I don't know why I didn't like it. It had a lot of things I liked. I don't know.
I mean, it was a mixed bag for me. I thought it was pretty good, not great, but I think it would have found its footing had it been allowed to continue. The little rant that I have about this goes back to, I don't know if you watched the Dark Crystal series on Netflix when that came out a few years ago. Again, Dark Crystal, another movie that I grew up on that came out in the 80s. They made this legacy prequel series that came out, the Jim Henson Company made it. It looks awesome. It's really cool. It ends on a cliffhanger and then it got canceled. So it's like my rant is, if you get one of these series that's going to be like, maybe people are going to watch it, maybe they aren't. It's kind of like a gamble. Don't have it end on a cliffhanger. Just have it be a self-contained season that ends and you have a complete story. This way, at least it's done. You don't have to worry about it. If you get renewed for a second season, you could come up with another story, but don't rely on the fact that you have to be renewed, because now this Willow series is just open ended. There's a character that's like lost in this futuristic alternate evil timeline, and that'll never get resolved unless they come back and do it like in a comic book or a novel. I don't know. I was a little bummed to hear that this got canceled. It didn't terribly surprise me because I don't think it ever, and you saw people talking about it, and I think it did find a niche audience, but I don't think it was like in the cultural zeitgeist the way that a lot of these like Star Wars series are. I don't know, would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I'm wondering if kind of short form creators are hurting themselves with this continuing dynamic, because I feel like a lot of people I know, and I fall into this category with certain series too, where I don't bother with it
Yeah,
until it's kind of done
right.
with, because then I can binge it. It's not like the old days where if you didn't watch it when it aired, you either had to wait for the rerun, and maybe the rerun wouldn't happen, so you would, be totally losing out on it. Now you can just kind of wait. I mean, for example, this Willow season, it's totally available to you now, all these, weeks and months later. But now, knowing what we know, it's not being renewed for the next season, and it ends on a cliffhanger that you're never going to have.
Yeah,
It's like, I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. And I kind of wish that more series would do like kind of a limited focus, like what you're talking
right.
about. In essence,
Yeah,
this is chapter one. We hope we'll get chapter two. We're
right.
not sure we'll get chapter two, but
But
here's,
it will still be satisfying if there's
yeah,
only chapter one, right?
yeah. So you can feel comfortable investing in it, because
Yeah,
so many series now start these big
yes,
mythologies, and then you're kind of left hanging, even when they do run their whole course. But hopefully not then, but usually it's like, kind of that kind of
I was thinking somebody should start a streaming service that's just all the shows that got canceled before they were done
Isn't
and
that
renew them
Netflix?
all. I guess, yeah, it was Netflix, and then Netflix started canceling
Right.
things too.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just kind of a bummer way to start off this week's Star Wars headlines. But let's talk about more fun stuff like the Indiana Jones Lego sets that got announced this week. I'm super excited about these. There's three sets that got announced. There was a fourth one that was rumored, a Temple of Doom one that doesn't look like it's either happening or got delayed or whatever. But we're getting Temple of the Golden Idol, which is the first scene from Raiders of the Lost Ark. You got the fighter plane chase from Last Crusade, and Escape from the Lost Tomb, which is basically the Well of the Souls from Raiders. I have a couple of the indie Lego sets from 2008 when they made them, when Kingdom of the Crystal Skull was coming out. They did the same thing where they made sets to go along with the original trilogy. So I don't know if I'll get all of these, but I think I might want that really big one, the Temple of the Golden Idol, that has all the stuff from that opening scene. Have you taken a look at these? What do you think of the Indiana Jones Lego sets,
I'm
Rebecca?
excited for the arrival of these minifigs.
Yeah,
They look really fun. I see a Marion and Sala,
yeah,
and that I don't remember the name of the figures at the beginning of the film, but that poor guy who gets all
yeah.
nasty in the,
Sabito or Satipo or whatever. Yeah,
yeah,
the Alfred Molina character. Is that what you mean? Yeah.
yeah. So I see him. So that uh temple is pretty awesome.
Yep.
You
It's
can
it's
create the boulder rolling
right.
scene, you can create the swinging over the pit scene. Those are all, available, in that enormous kit. I don't even wanna think about what the price is gonna be on that.
I think it's like $150 or something. So
Really?
not
Oh, it is. Not
terrible.
that
Yeah.
not that earth-shattering considering. Wow, okay.
Right. Yeah. I may have to pick that one up. But yeah, these look really cool. You can find pictures of these over at laughingplace.com. Getting into actual Star Wars news, there was the announcement of the new anthology short story collection From a Certain Point of View. Return of the Jedi is coming out in September in honor of the 40th anniversary of that film. They've done this before with A New Hope and with Empire Strikes Back. You got 40 short stories in each book about different background characters, like their point of view of each little scene that happens in that film. I have mixed feelings about this because I actually kind of struggled getting through the first two books. Like I thought I made the joke when I reviewed them that they had a 40% success rate in honor of the 40th anniversary of these movies. But I was looking at the list of contributing authors this time, and there's a lot of really talented people. I'm going to keep an open mind as I always try to do. Have you checked these other books out? Is this something that had interested you, Rebecca?
I haven't listened, I haven't watched, no, let me try that again. I haven't listened to very much of it. I checked it out of my library on an audiobook form, the Empire one.
Yeah.
And I ended up like getting busy and not listening to it. So I have it back on my list to check back out again. I'm not that excited about them, but I keep feeling like I should give them a try. It's an interesting idea. I love the notion. So I should probably, support it, and so there'll be more of it. But
it is a good idea. I did think the first two books were kind of a mixed bag for me, but like I said, I will approach this Return of the Jedi one with an open mind. There's a bunch of people actually who have been on this show who are contributing to that. So at the very least, go ahead.
Have you seen specifically, like, is there any hints yet as to what storylines? Because I'm my recollection is that with like the New Hope one, we got kind of an insider view on R5D4, who is now taking a major role in Mando.
Right. I don't know if they've released the list of characters that they're covering. I think maybe just the authors have come out.
Because who would you want to see? Who would you be? Who are you hoping to get the stories of?
I think there's probably a lot of good stories about Jabba the Hutt. All the creatures in Jabba's palace. But we've gotten that before. Like when I was a teenager, they put out Tales from Jabba's Palace, which is kind of the same idea, same kind of short story collection. So they've told a lot of those stories. There's probably going to be a Salacious Crumb. But then, you go to like Bespin. No, Bespin, that's Empire. I mean, you go to, let's
Endor.
see.
We can go to Endor and get some insider stuff from like Wicket and friends.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll get some good Ewok stories. And then like even at the Rebel briefing, I always wondered like, oh, what's that guy's story in the background? So
gotcha.
Maybe there's like a prune face guy who shows up in that scene. So maybe we'll get a prune face.
Think we'll get any off-planet celebratory stories too? That'd be kind of fun because they have that sequence now with the new edition of
that's kind of like the story that I wrote for Lodico Fenton. It was it took place at that moment, or it ended at that moment of the Emperor Palpatine statue being pushed over on Coruscant. So that would be cool to see. Let's see. Our co-contributor to laughingplace.com, Alex Reif, was there, and he wrote up some recaps of presentations by Doug Chiang. Had a panel. Then there was a screening of the movie A Disturbance in the Force, which is a documentary about the making of the Star Wars Holiday Special, which I'm really looking forward to seeing. And you can go and read Alex's review of that film and his recap of the Doug Chiang panel at laughingplace.com. And then speaking of conventions, D23, the Disney fan club, is going to be hosting a special 40th anniversary screening of Return of the Jedi at Star Wars Celebration, or like off-site at Star Wars during Star Wars Celebration. It's I think a $40 ticket if you're a D23 Gold member, and I want to say it's $50 if you're not a member, which is a pricey screening, but it's definitely probably going to be a cool, fun event. Maybe they'll have some guests there. Who knows? Celebrate the 40th anniversary of Return of the Jedi over there in London. And speaking of Star Wars Celebration, they did release the badge art, which is very cool. If you can go to, I think it's on laughingplace.com, and on the official Star Wars Celebration website, you can go and check out the art that is going to be on your badge if you're attending the event. And last but definitely not least, regarding Star Wars Celebration, we now have the time and the date for my Who's the Bossk panel, which is going to be at 5:00 p.m. on Saturday, which is April the 8th, at the HoloNet News Stage, room 17. So don't get confused. There are two HoloNet News Stage. Mine is going to be in room 17. I do not have information about the guests to give you yet. That is still TBD and TBA, but I will hopefully have that information very soon. What are your thoughts on all this news coming out of Celebration, Rebecca? Are you looking forward to following from, remotely?
Oh, totally. I'm very, they've done a magnificent job in the past of kind of bringing those of us fans who aren't on site to the event. So I'm looking forward to not only your coverage and what comes out of the fan site reports, but I also know that StarWars.com and their YouTube channel does a great job. And I'm so excited for your panel because that's super. I can't imagine as a fan all these years to now see like something that has that official Star Wars logo on it, and then see my own name and creation listed there as part of as participating, like an active participant in that.
Right. Yeah. This morning I was alerted to the fact that the HoloNet News stage schedule has gone up on the official Star Wars Celebration website, and I can go on there and see my name and the name of Who's the Bossk, which is just so cool. Like, it really does feel like a culmination of a lot of effort that's gone into putting this podcast together. So I'm super, super excited about that. And I hope, and I want to thank you, of course, and everybody who's allowed me to do this show on Laughing Place in the first place. So definitely super psyched. And like I said, more information about that panel coming. I hope that you will show up if you are coming to Star Wars Celebration this year. Would love to see you in the audience for that panel. Hoping to have some very special guests to chat with for that hour. Let's get into the last few items here in Star Wars headlines. A couple new comics came out this week. Yoda #5 and the High Republic Adventures #3 were both released. I read them both, enjoyed them both, and wrote reviews for both over at laughingplace.com. We had the actress Katee Sackhoff visiting Star Wars Galaxy's Edge at Disneyland, and she got to meet the Mandalorian, the walk-around costume character there, and Grogu, the puppet, or actual Grogu, whatever you want to consider him, is there as well. What did you think of this PR stunt? I don't know. It looked like she was genuinely having a good time. What did you think of that news that came out of? I think it was on the Disney Parks blog, Rebecca.
Anytime my day can have more Katee, I am happy. I am happy. So
I guess
it was great to see her.
Want to follow up with a question that I had for you about this tiny microphone thing, because I feel like I'm out of the loop on this, because I've seen it a couple times, mostly on red carpet. Somebody will hand a celebrity this tiny little wired microphone that they'll talk into to answer questions. It just looks so awkward to me. And then at Disneyland, they've got Katee Sackhoff building her lightsaber and everything, which is cool. And then they have her doing a little intro for it, and she's holding this tiny little mic with the wire coming off the bottom of the screen. And it's just like, all I'm thinking is, well, they can't get a boom mic or something. This is Disneyland. It's a
okay,
classy joint, right?
But here's the deal. So much of what we do now within all of it is on so much smaller tech. They're not bringing. Yeah. I doubt they had the enormous film crew with some of this. Like that right. moment, I wouldn't be surprised if it was somebody's iPhone, right? I mean, that's how more and more that seems to be how I see this kind of stuff created. And in order to that's like, you don't need all that for the sound to be good with your phone. So you give them the small lapel mic. Now, could you take the time and maybe like actually attach it to her? So rather than just holding the little mic, it's like appropriately attached or whatever.
I think that would have bothered me less. Yeah.
Sure. But there's no, I mean, other than pleasing Mike's aesthetic, there's no real reason to do that anymore. So yeah, it's one of those things where, because you got to have all the powering for that kind of mic and all the so many extra layers, and every layer of tech that you add between you, it's just another layer that can go wrong. So so simple is best.
Okay, I'll accept that. And you can go and watch the Katee Sackhoff visiting Galaxy's Edge video. I think it's on the Disney Parks blog, and we've got it on laughingplace.com as well. And then lastly, we got a new character poster for The Mandalorian for Peli Motto, the Amy Sedaris character, which is great and fun. I think she's had posters before, but this one she's missing the tooth which she lost in the Book of Boba Fett, and that carried over to this season of The Mandalorian. So more character posters come out each week. We'll check back in on those. And that's going to bring us to the first of our two main topics for this week. The first thing we're going to talk about is The Bad Batch Season 2, Episode 13. Oh my gosh. Season 2, Episode 13. The title is Pabu. P-A-B-U. And let's get into this by asking Rebecca. Rebecca, what is your history and relationship with The Bad Batch? Have you been watching this show from the start? Do you enjoy it? And what are your thoughts on the previous 12 episodes of season 2 before this week's episode?
Overall, I enjoy The Bad Batch. I have been with it since it launched on Disney Plus. I was not super deep in this world previously, so it's kind of been a bit of a learning curve for me as far as just getting really comfortable kind of within this particular storytelling within Star Wars. I enjoy Omega a lot. I very much enjoy the interplay between her and each of the members of the Bad Batch, how they, each have their own kind of persona. It's very reminiscent to me of the A-Team, which I loved when I was a little kid. So I always dreamed I was a little kid who got thrown into the A-Team, and so therefore
did the A-Team have a kid that they were friends with?
They had this female reporter chick.
Okay.
And I was like, why have a female reporter chick? You should have a little kid like me who somehow needs them to, be my surrogate family.
So it hits perfect.
Yeah,
exactly.
It hits that perfectly.
Great. Okay, so let's get into this week's episode. Pabu. What did you think overall of this episode, Pabu, Rebecca?
It feels very game-changing, where the Bad Batch has been this kind of renegade squad who's constantly trying to kind of, they're on the move without a real, home base, yet they have this child among them. And you're seeing the relationships develop more strongly between them. The Hunter especially seems to be more fatherly in a way. Mm-hmm. And so this particular episode, they journey to a planet for their friend Fee. I guess it's her home world.
Yeah.
And in doing so, it feels as though story kind of moves on. You feel as though, well, maybe this is going to be home, but what's that going to do to the show? Because they've been this kind of group on the run all this time. Are they really going to kind of set up roots? I don't know. It's very intriguing.
So there was this observation made by the Wanda Sykes character, Fee Genoa, that you mentioned early on in this episode, that Omega kind of needs to be a kid for a little while and needs to find friends that are her age. And this, somebody else has said this earlier in the season as well. I think I don't remember who it was exactly, but that same point was made by another character early in the season. So I think that seems to be the direction that they're headed. I think, the Bad Batch want to find a place where Omega doesn't have to be on the run and can be a kid for a little while. And maybe this is that place. I do think for the first 15 to 20 minutes of this episode, you're kind of thinking this feels a little bit too good to be true.
Mm-hmm.
And there's almost a weird tension kind of building because of that, because, we're used to consuming stories, and in stories, you need some kind of a conflict or the rug to be pulled out from underneath you in a way. And it's just one right after another. It's just everybody's so happy to be living there, and it's very peaceful and calm. And then, of course, there's this giant earthquake and a tidal wave that is threatening to destroy the whole lower levels of this island city. And that becomes the rest of the episode as they're trying to evacuate the lower levels and get, Omega has ventured out into the ocean with her new friend, whose name is, Liana.
Mm-hmm.
And she needs to get back in, and they have to save her. So that's kind of the threat. But even after that's over, it seems like, okay, they've decided they want to stay and help kind of rebuild. And I don't know, what do you think, kind of skipping ahead here, what do you think the long-term plan for this location on the show is? Do you think they may have the Bad Batch and Omega kind of wind up remaining here in the long term.
Yeah, I'm super curious because one of the things that's motivated the Bad Batch that we see is kind of them constantly helping out the the underdog, as it
Yeah.
were, somehow coming in and ending up helping out people in need. And so in this situation, as you point out, this entire community's town has been leveled by this
Right.
monstrous tidal wave. And so you can see that there's this call for them, right? They can fulfill that aspect of their personality that likes to help people. So that's there. You've got kind of, it seems like maybe a little bit of a little romance, maybe kind of developing between Fee and the one who's
Oh,
very
Tech. Yeah.
tech.
Uh-huh.
You've got that. You've got Hunter being able to see Omega have a kind of a more of a normal childhood, giggling, laughing, playing with this other kid. And then you've got Wrecker, who is full for the first time ever, because I've never been full before. So you feel like each one's kind of getting that box checked off.
Yeah.
And so but in the background, right, you have Sid, this tension with Sid,
Yeah.
who had been their friend before, but yet there's clearly something not cool there. So you're wondering how is that going to come into play? Is that going to kind of undermine this effort? And then just the looming baddie of the galaxy, or is that somehow going to come in and
Right.
be problematic for them here too? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued. I don't know how I feel about it. Because I'm there's part of me that's worried that maybe Omega will kind of fade a little bit. I don't know, because TV shows tend to do that with kids roles.
Right.
I mean, and I figure that's usually more about the actor hours,
Yeah.
but it's just, are we going to see them kind of, say, well, watch Omega for us as we go do this.
Well, I actually kind of wonder if they are building toward an end game here, because we don't know. We talked about this last week on this podcast. We don't know if the Bad Batch is coming back for season 3. I have seen next week's episode, but I haven't seen the 2-part finale. So we don't know, like, their way out of the game. They could
Okay.
end up here at the end of the season. I don't know. Just a kind of a way to get them to safety and have them have a permanent home. The other thing I was kind of thinking about that kind of occurred to me is, like, why would they rebuild the lower level of the city? But if in that much tidal waves, but then I was like, this is exactly on the water on a canal on Long Island, and it
Mhm.
was a hurricane Sandy a decade ago, and my family has had floods in the past. My grandpa converted it. So it's like the history kind of repeats itself, but I think people just want to live next to the water for whatever reason. It's a nice way to live. So I guess it made sense logistically, and it echoed, I think, the way we live our lives in the real world. Let's talk about, you know what? I want to rewind actually to the opening scene and mention how much I loved an Easter egg that they threw in here. Because I know you're not a Temple of Doom person, right? As much as you love Raiders of the Lost Ark, you haven't seen Temple of Doom, right?
You are correct. I have not seen
Okay.
Temple of Doom.
So the opening scene to this episode really reminded me of the opening scene of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. And then when they left this kind of futuristic nightclub place, they go outside and you can see a neon sign in the Star Wars Arabic language. And if you translate the sign, it says Club Lao She, which is a reference to Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. The club in the opening scene is called Club Obi-Wan, which is, of course, a reference to the other Lucasfilm property. It's Indiana Jones referencing Star Wars, and now Star Wars is referencing the villain in the opening scene of Temple of Doom, whose name was Lao She.
Oh, wow.
So just a perfect full circle after 40 years, really. It'll be 40 years next year. Temple of Doom came out, and I just love that Easter egg. So kudos to whoever put that in there. I just wanted to mention that. And then you mentioned Sid and how the Bad Batch is kind of on the outs with Sid. What do you think is going on there? Because I feel like this is going to come to a head in the finale. What direction do you think this is going in?
I I am so like this show for me is it's a bit confusing. I have a hard time with just really figuring out kind of what the motivations of characters are. For Sid being one of them.
Mhm.
It feels like this relationship with them is mutually beneficial, and yet she's deliberately antagonistic, and I don't understand why.
Right.
And so I am unsure where your question is good, but because I find her as confusing as a character,
Yeah.
motivationally, I'm unsure what to where I don't even have a guess because I am so confused by her behavior towards them.
I think, yeah, my guess is that they wanted to set up Sid to have kind of this heel turn, as they would call it in
Okay.
wrestling,
Okay.
and then maybe didn't give it enough groundwork to get us there.
Okay.
Because they did in one of the early episodes this season, the racing episode, they had that guy, the Ernie Hudson character, was
Mhm.
warning them about how Sid was going to stab him in the back eventually. And then when they were waiting on that planet to get picked up, and Sid was like, you know what, you got to find your own way home or whatever, or like, I can't get to you until a few days from now or whatever. And they kind of lost faith in her there. So I don't know, maybe they just haven't done enough work in getting us to understand like why Sid is suddenly so antagonistic, like you said. But I do think in that two-part finale that's coming up at the end of this month, there's going to be this culmination of probably both the big arcs of this season, the Sid plot, and then the Empire and Crosshair and the cloning facility on Mount Tantus. All that stuff I think is all going to pay off probably in the finale, and it remains to be seen how exactly their relationship with Sid is going to wind up.
Uh,
Yeah.
if you would lay odds though, Mike, when the end of the season happens, are you going to come away from it more with kind of Sid in their camp or Sid definitely not on their side? Do you know what I mean? Is there going to be an ultimate betrayal
Yeah.
or some sort of sacrificial assistance? Because that's kind of where I feel Sid is. It's going to go one
Yeah.
way. Not for me. I feel like Sid's either going to do an ultimate betrayal of the Bad Batch for personal reasons, or
Yeah.
somehow is going to make some sort of personal sacrifice to benefit them. Because while she seems like a baddie, she's got a good heart or something.
Well, Star Wars does love its redemption stories. So if I had to decide right now, I would say there will probably be some kind of redemption for Sid. And like you said, she'll make a sacrifice either of herself or, what does she love more than anything? It's money or acquiring money. So
Yeah.
she'll have to. That was always, I don't know. She's like a Scrooge McDuck or whatever. Where it's like money is the only thing that matters until like someone you love is threatened, and then your true colors come through. Maybe that's the way she'll go. So
Okay.
that could be it. Anything else you want to say about this episode, Pabu, before we move on? I thought it was
Um,
very pretty. I thought the
yes.
design of the island was very pretty.
Yeah, yes, and I feel like was it the score that was particularly? No, I think I'm thinking Mando. I know one of
Okay.
them I was just really taken with the audio, but I think it was Mando.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, the city is cool. A tweet, and I forgot to write down who it was, but there was this tweet that found it interesting that the Omega was born on Kamino, which was a water planet,
Yeah.
and now they find themselves on this planet where they're kind of in an island. In essence, it's almost a very similar situation. Even Omega talks about
Right.
the similarity to where she was from. And so I found that a nice little kind of a bookendy type
Hmm.
story arc for Omega in the current situation. So
Yeah.
yeah.
That's true. I hadn't really thought about that, but yeah, I like that parallel. So we've got 3 episodes left in total. Like I said, I've seen next week's episode. It's a good one. Then there's the two-part finale that I have not seen. What are you, besides the stuff we've already talked about, like the Sid relationship wrapping up, what are you hoping to see or expecting to see for the rest of season 2 of The Bad Batch?
More Omega Bow. because that was almost my pick for weapon, because I think her
Okay.
bow is super cool and we
Right.
haven't got to see it enough. And so
Okay.
I want more Omega bow, and I also am looking forward to seeing more of the Kaminoans, especially
Mm.
the ones that the is it a no, the prime minister, no, the prime minister is the baddie, right? The
Yeah.
scientist is the one who has kind of the soft spot for Omega.
Remembering their names is always tough for me. One of them is Lama Su.
Yep, me too. So yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing them more,
Yeah.
and that, and I'm hoping for a Kaminoan reunion with Omega somehow, because I feel that there's
Okay.
a little bit of resolution there, but
Yeah.
you know, that's where I'm
Mm.
at.
Yeah, I can almost see the quote unquote good Kaminoan kind of being rescued and maybe ending up on Pabu, the
Mhm.
island planet. Who
Yeah.
knows? We will find out very soon. That's going to bring us to the end of our discussion of the Bad Batch and to our final main topic for this episode, and that is The Mandalorian, Chapter 19, The Convert. Before we get into this episode, same question again for you, Rebecca. What is your relationship? What is your history with this series? And what did you think of this season so far before this episode?
I adore Mandalorian. I am very. I was in this particular season. I was hoping and still hope for a deeper dive into the Mandalore culture. I have
Mhm.
often talked with friends and other Star Wars fans about how Lucas had the opportunity to create this entire kind of religion in a way with the Force and its belief system, and the way it's practiced in varying ways. And now we have Filoni, who is in many ways trained under the wing of Lucas, and I feel like Mandalore and Mandalorian is his chance. The Way is a chance for Filoni and with Favreau to kind of create a new and different branch of thought and lifestyle and religion within that Star Wars universe. And so I'm keen to learn more about it. And I'm hope and what little bits have been dropped so far have been incredibly enticing, and I'm hoping for more, which is why this episode was frustrating for me.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's get into that then. So there is a bit of Mandalorian stuff going on in the beginning and end of this episode, but the rest of the episode, as we'll talk about, was very different. So chapter 19, The Convert, it did have those bookends with Din Djarin and Bo-Katan getting into some action on Kalevala, and then back on the planet with the Mandalorian covert. But then in the middle, we go to Coruscant, and we get really the first episode that features a character, as the protagonist who's not Din Djarin or Grogu. And we zoom in on this supporting character who hasn't been in a ton of episodes before, but it's a character that I thought was intriguing in the first two seasons. His name is Dr. Pershing. He's played by Omid Abtahi, a pretty good actor, I thought. And this episode is all about him kind of readjusting to life in the New Republic after he's been captured and deprogrammed, I guess, from the Empire. So uh let's get into it then, Rebecca. What did you think of this episode?
I both loved and hated it.
Okay.
In that for me, it was I was in the mood for chocolate, and they gave
Hmm.
me a little sample of the most exquisite chocolate at the beginning, and this amazing dish in between, and then a little bitty taste of chocolate at the end. And while
Okay.
that middle dish was fantastic, I had arrived in the mood for chocolate. So so I had to adjust my mindset. So after I
Yeah.
watched it through, I think I told you I need to watch this again with letting go of my
Right.
desire for chocolate. And once I did that, the middle portion of this episode does something that I always that is part of what makes science fiction writing and those creations particularly intriguing to me. And that is when it kind of dives into social and political topics and kind of gives you a space to talk about it without necessarily talking about the realities of your current world. So you can just talk more in a less uh, uh, I don't know how to put it, but you can talk about the topics without people feeling personally attacked because it's their belief, right? You can talk
Right.
about it within this fictional world,
Right.
so you can more easily discuss it. In this case, specifically in the Mandalorian, I very much enjoyed the discussions on Coruscant with the kind of the wealthy,
Yes.
because I found it interesting how, to me, this episode seemed to dive into the notion that the wealthy kind of just, are little impacted. No matter who's in charge, they're little impacted. Their day to day was kind of, the same, to the point where he was like, New Republic, Empire, I don't know
Yeah.
which. I just stay out of all of it. So I like that, and it allows for those kinds of discussions to happen. And then also seeing the sequence with the mind flayer, for me, is kind of, I like the notion of beware when you get the power after you've taken away the power, lest
Mhm.
you become the very power that you're trying not to be,
Yeah.
that you overcame. And I like those topics and those discussions.
Yeah.
And so the fact that it offers those was what I love about sci-fi.
Yeah, there's so much to talk about here, and I kind of want to go through everything you just said, like piece by piece. But I want to start my thoughts on this episode by asking you: do you think the reception to this kind of an episode and to the episodes in the Book of Boba Fett that weren't about Boba Fett, do you think the reception would be better if they just combined all this stuff and called it Star Wars, the TV show, and you tuned in each week and you didn't know what you were going to get? And it could be, a character, it could be an episode about a character in the prequel era, or it could be about Dr. Pershing adjusting to the New Republic or whatever. Do you think people would be more open to that if we didn't go in with this expectation of the title is The Mandalorian and this episode is not actually about the Mandalorian? Is the title what's throwing people off, do you think?
I think with this episode, yes, but
Yeah.
I don't know that the franchise would be well served by doing the kind of overarching, and you're never quite the potpourri. You're never quite sure what you're going to get.
Yeah.
But I hope that this is kind of more of a one-off notion than what we saw with Boba Fett, where it felt like there were quite a few episodes kind of
Yeah.
that just kind of took you out of the storyline that you had been. I mean, for me, I have watched a lot of Star Trek television, and this is now Star Wars entering into the world of television. And with Star Trek TV, the Next Generation had a different feel than Deep Space Nine, and it would have been very strange. It's like there's a certain expectation for me when I would watch Deep Space Nine. I had a very different expectation of the types of story I would get to an
Yeah.
extent versus Next Gen. And
Right.
so with this felt very Andor. And
Yes.
Andor's fantastic, but just everything about it, the music, the sets, the
Yeah.
the just felt very, very Andor.
Well, speaking of Andor, this is definitely one of the points I wanted to hit on. So you mentioned the conversation that Dr. Pershing has with the wealthy people outside of the opera house. By the way, great Easter egg, the opera house from Revenge of the Sith, where they go and watch the opera that is indeed called Squid Lake in Revenge of the Sith. This is the same place where Dr. Pershing is giving his kind of TED talk at the beginning of this episode. Then he's chatting with, he's approached by these aristocrats outside, and they're talking about, like you mentioned, they can't tell the difference between the Empire and the Rebels and the New Republic. And this did remind me of conversations we heard in Andor mostly from Mon Mothma's husband. And then it
Mhm.
also went back to The Last Jedi from the Benicio del Toro character. DJ said the same thing. It's all the same in the end, which is, I think, becoming a recurring theme of whether or not that's true in Star Wars, which there's shades of gray, definitely. I think, as we saw in the remainder of this episode, we also saw Dr. Pershing's living quarters. Reminded me an awful lot. I don't know if it was meant to be the same location, but it looks an awful lot like where the character Cyril Karn lives in
Mhm.
Andor, and then where he goes and works is like very sterile office space, looks kind of similar to where Cyril works in Andor. I know these two shows have very different um, behind the scenes crews and writers and directors, but there is, this is Lucasfilm story group tying everything together. So I don't know if this was intentional or by accident, but it does seem like there were a lot of parallels to Andor. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
No, I completely agree, and those same images connected with me in the same way, brought to mind those moments in Andor as well. Kind of talking about themes. The episode is titled "The Convert," right, Mike?
Yes, correct.
It's interesting to me how, in some ways, that's like both the Pershing character and Bo-Katan, right? You've got
Well, this is like when I see, so I know some people have had a problem with the structure of this episode. I even saw somebody compare it to the structure of the Book of Boba Fett, where you would have, often in the Book of Boba Fett, it would have bookends, and then the entire middle section of the episode would be a flashback to Boba Fett hanging out with the Tusken Raiders or whatever. And that's kind of a similar structure to this episode, where you have the bookends of Bo-Katan and Din Djarin's adventure. In the middle was Dr. Pershing. But I do think they were drawing a parallel between what's going on with Dr. Pershing's character and Bo-Katan, because they are both being converted to a different way of belief. I think that is the direction that they're pointing us in. And yeah, I think the title definitely applies to both of those characters. And I think that's actually a good place to kind of go off on a tangent here and talk a little bit about Bo-Katan, because the episode does start with Din and Bo-Katan on Mandalore, on the planet Mandalore. It's right after they're coming out of the living waters, and Bo-Katan is still kind of reeling from having seen the mythosaur. And Din Djarin wakes up, and Bo-Katan asks, well, first of all, he says, "Oh, I'm redeemed now. Basically, we can leave. We did what I came here to do, so we can get out of here." And Bo-Katan asks him if he saw anything alive in the waters, and he said, he was just sinking, so he didn't really see anything. And she doesn't tell him about the mythosaur. Why do you think that is?
I think she's processing.
Yeah.
I really think that she's not 100% convinced herself yet. I mean, that's where I took it. I took it as, if I say that I saw it, he's going to either think I'm insane, or most likely be like, this isn't magnificent. Like, there's going to be some reaction to it that she wasn't ready to deal with. So rather than tell him, she kept it to herself.
Yeah. Okay. I think that's probably true. And then we get to, they leave, they go back to this planet Kalevala, or the moon, I guess, of Kalevala, where Bo-Katan has her castle. I think it is a planet. But on the way there, they're attacked by this squadron of TIE fighters, TIE interceptors, actually, as they point out, the ones with the pointy wings. And they're chased down to the planet's surface. There's this big, exciting dogfight sequence that ends with our heroes successful, but then TIE bombers show up and blow up Bo-Katan's castle. And we're left with this question that they ask, which is, well, where did all these TIE fighters come from? And I think Din Djarin has this line where he says, this is more ships than an Imperial warlord would have. So what was the implication there to you?
Okay, well, first off, I want to say something before we get to that, because what hit me immediately during the sequence was that Bo-Katan did not take off her helmet.
Yes.
To me, she always seemed like someone who was just, okay, as soon as I, pretty much she would throw it off as quickly as possible. So we see her on the planet, and then we see her in the sky. We see her all through this dogfight. That helmet did not leave her head. So I was like, okay, this is leading me somewhere. And this makes me think that the mythosaur moment was a moment for her, and is leading to lots of processing, to the point where she's beginning to question things, to the point where she's not taking off her helmet as she had always done, previously. That's kind of where I was.
Okay.
And then you've got all this dogfight going on and all this battle, and then this question comes. And for me, it hit in that way. And I expected to look at Twitter and see a lot of comments like I did all through Wanda, of how it was hinting at Thrawn, in the same way that everybody saw Mephisto everywhere.
Uh-huh.
So, and I found people who were saying, ooh, Thrawn. And then I saw other people who simply were like, oh, maybe Moff Gideon, you know, something going on there, but
I think the
where
difference.
does Mike Celestino lie?
I think the difference between Mephisto and Thrawn is that we do know that Thrawn is coming up. Um, they've already talked about Thrawn, so yeah, my mind immediately went to Thrawn. This is probably Thrawn's fleet. How he got the information to go attack this planet where Bo-Katan has her castle, I don't know. Maybe he's following Gideon. We'll get into Moff Gideon. So it's hinted later on that Moff Gideon may have escaped before his tribunal or whatever. So I don't know. We're not sure exactly what's going on there. But yeah, my thought was they are setting up Thrawn to either appear later on in this season of Mandalorian or in the Ahsoka show at some point. But yeah, we don't have too much more information about that. But let's skip to the end before we go back to Dr. Pershing.
And with this attack, they're also completely obliterating Bo's foundation, right? They've torn. So she's been exposed to the mythosaur,
yes,
which rocks her, and now her residence is gone. So she is very, very much an individual without a foundation right now.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting, especially in parallel with where we will see Pershing. But in this moment, yes. And so now you're going to take us to the end of the episode.
Yeah. Before we go back to Dr. Pershing, we'll continue with this storyline, which ends up, because Bo-Katan's home is destroyed, Din is nice enough to invite her over to his house at the Mandalorian covert where the armorer and Paz Vizsla are hanging out, and they welcome them in, and Paz Vizsla is, of course, at first like, oh, did you, he doesn't believe that they actually visited the mines and the living waters, but fortunately Din has taken this. So when Din scooped the water out of did you think it's Splash Mountain? Did you?
Oh, how funny! Oh no, I didn't.
That was the first thing I thought of. Like, he's gonna sell it on eBay.
No, I hadn't, but now I will.
But yeah, he's got this little vial full of the water of the living waters, and the armorer tests it, and they are redeemed. And she also says, like, oh, Bo-Katan, have you removed your helmet since you were in the water? And she says no. And the episode ends with Bo-Katan kind of looking at that mythosaur skull, the Beskar mythosaur skull that's hanging on the wall there, and kind of considering her place in this Mandalorian sect or cult or whatever you want to call it. I don't know. What do you think about Bo-Katan's mindset at the end of this episode?
It's amazing to me that I pulled out of that unsurety.
Yeah.
I pulled out of, because I mean, there's no facial expression. It's all posture and storyline that creates that, because it's not like I can, see Katee's face or whomever is, within the Mandalorian costume. But no, for me, it was a sense of, is this the way? I was always skeptical of it, but okay, now I'm seeing evidence that is saying that maybe this is the way.
Right.
And that would be very challenging, right? Because especially if you're alone and now you have this group around, so now you feel as part of something. That's an important part of us as humans, as Terrans, and apparently within this universe too, that to be a part of something larger, right? And so, and I think the community online, the Twitter community, seems to be split. You're saying cult versus sect. Time will tell, right? I'm not exactly sure where we're supposed to place the armorer and this particular group. Are we supposed to place them within that orthodoxy that is problematic? Yeah. Or is this orthodoxy that we can respect and appreciate that they're becoming part of? I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to take them yet, right? So I'm kind of in that same place as Bo. That's okay. As a viewer, that's where they've put me, in the same place as Bo. Is because so much of what Mando has done, we applaud and respect, and it seems to have been born out of this adherence to the way. So, but I'm unsure if that ultimately, like, because he did take off his helmet in that moment because of, my assistant brought me a Powerade. Nice. In that moment, And so, like I say, I'm unsure what the authors and writers want me to do. They want me to be, oh no, she's joined a cult,
Mm.
or do they want me to be excited that they're embracing the way? I'm torn.
Well, last week I had predicted that they were going to swap, that Bo-Katan was going to become the faithful and Din Djarin was going to
Mm.
lose his faith, but it doesn't seem like it's going that way right now because Din
Mm.
Djarin is still all aboard the Children of the Watch. He ready to get back into it. He's happy to be redeemed, and now Bo-Katan is maybe on board as well. So that's not at all what I predicted. But speaking of this is the way, I love the moment where it seems like Grogu is trying to say that, and they both kind of look back at him on the ship there. That was a fun moment. Let's get back into Coruscant and Dr. Pershing. So there's this amnesty program that he is participating in. The first thing I thought of when we started hearing about this was something called Operation Paperclip, which took place after World War II, and German scientists were offered amnesty in exchange for coming and working for the U.S. Army and intelligence and scientific research, stuff like that. The difference, I think, between Paperclip and what they're doing in the Star Wars version is that they don't actually have Pershing working on scientific research. He's mostly doing like data entry. He's not really using his expertise, even though he is giving this talk about his work in cloning and DNA. It doesn't seem to be what he's actually focused on. He's got more of a data entry job like Cyril Karn did in Andor. But I think the question starts to arise, like pretty much as soon as we get to know him a little bit in this episode. And we've seen him before. I think we've sympathized with him before on this show. But do you think that his heart is in this amnesty program? Is he ready to commit to the New Republic, or is he still underneath? Is he still faithful to the ideals of what the Empire stood for?
I think he seems to be very much focused on his science, and
Yeah.
whoever will give him the freedom to explore his science is who will receive his allegiance. Is how I'm taking him. I don't have a sense that there is some profound empire ideology that he is in support of. If the empire, if whichever side will let me continue to explore this research that I believe is so important to the universe,
Yeah.
that is who I will support and offer my allegiance to. And once again, the show introduces themes that are then able to be discussed in kind of a larger scale. The notion of when you do have a conflict, a massive conflict, and you do have a side that there's a clearly kind of an evil and that is defeated. What do you do? How do you deal with the individuals who were a part of that system, a part of that program? Where do you put them? How do you bring them back into society? What do we do? It's a very intriguing idea, intriguing discussion to having kind of in a in a less concrete way,
Right.
less real world way.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of along the same lines, the idea that is also introduced in this episode is that the New Republic may not be as benevolent as we would have assumed. In fact, it has a lot in common with the Empire. They're assigning numbers to these people that they've taken into the amnesty program instead of referring to them by their names. They all have numbers, which I thought was probably a mistake. There's this bureaucracy that you wouldn't expect, a freedom-loving government to embrace, and then at the end of the episode, of course, we see this horrible use of this mind flayer, but the Mon Calamari is trying to reassure Dr. Pershing. He's like, don't worry about it. We keep it on the low setting, like, oh, we're going to use this brainwashing machine, but it's turned down really low, so you don't have to worry about it. That to me was like a metaphor for how the New Republic is probably making the mistake of just being a much tamer version of the Empire. I don't know. What were your thoughts about all that stuff?
Yeah, the labels versus names was horrifying. It's
Yeah.
instantly uncomfortable. Yeah, that hit me immediately. The music choices for that sequence with the mind flayer thing,
Yeah.
that was like so uncomfortable. It's like legitimately like squirming my seat. I watched most of it kind of like behind my
Yeah.
eyes because it was very off-putting. Incredibly sterile set,
Right.
just everything about it was meant to be off-putting, and they did a brilliant job in making you uncomfortable. As that you have this Mon Calamari speaking to you in these very dulcet
Yeah.
tones and just very fake. I don't know.
Yes.
It's just so like I don't
Like
know. It was very
fabricated.
off-putting.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. And then I
um,
loved the joke, by the way, when Pershing was laying there and he talked about a trap, and then you see the
yeah.
Mon Calamari. That was even Doobie caught that one, and my husband doesn't usually kind of catch little moments, so he caught that one. So that was a nice little fan throw. But
That
no,
made me, yeah.
I agree with you 100% that like one of the elements of this particular episode that I really appreciated and enjoyed as a concept from the writers was this idea that sometimes you become that which you overthrow if you're not careful.
Yes.
The absolute power corrupts absolutely,
Right.
right? So you can just
Yes.
see how this cycle repeat. And what's interesting is, as we've seen, it would appear in some ways that whether it was the New Republic or not, the people the people themselves didn't necessarily benefit from whomever was in power. Their lives were still very much
Right.
challenged, and hence we see the events of the sequels, the
Right.
Rey era.
Absolutely. Yeah. Going back to the "it was a trap" line, that made me laugh out loud both times, and it's such an easy joke to make. "Oh, you got a Mon Calamari in this scene, let's make an 'it's a trap' joke," but it
Totally.
got me both times, like, it really caught me off guard. Very, very funny gag there, and the music that's playing in that scene is very reminiscent of I think it's called Jabba's Baroque Recital music, the John Williams music that plays, during part of the Jabba's palace sequence, but it's like a Muzak version of it.
Nice.
I'm pretty sure that's what they were going for there, but people have also pointed out that, when they visit the peak, the mountain peak
Mhm.
in the middle of the episode, the music that's playing there is like a carnival version of a track from The Force Awakens called, I think, Rise of the Resistance or something like that.
Mhm.
But yeah, I think the composer, Joseph Shirley, this season is doing a good job of kind of borrowing from some of the other Star Wars
Um,
scores. Yeah.
Speaking of borrowing, and I may be stepping on something that you have later in your notes, but I'm sure there were many references that, because you are within the Star Wars publishing world,
Mhm.
they kind of jumped out at you. I got that impression from some tweets I saw. I got that? Is that the case? Did certain things jump out at you because you read more Star Wars books?
Well, certainly when they got to the mountain peak, which is called Umate, or how I would have said it was Umate, but they say it Umate in the show. That's in a bunch of the books. I think it's been in like half a dozen books, both in the Legends continuity and in the current canon. So that was like, oh wow, I can't believe they took this thing out of the books. And somebody also tweeted a piece of Ralph McQuarrie concept art that had
Oh,
that
cool.
rock in it, which is just so cool that they're digging this deep into Star Wars lore. The days Bendu Day and Tong's Day
Mhm.
are both from Legends continuity. Like the Tong's Day is basically Friday, and Bendu Day is basically no, sorry, I got it backwards. Bendu Day is Friday, and Tong's Day is Wednesday. So when they say like, oh, Tong's Day, am I right? That's basically a Wednesday. And then he says Happy Bendu Day in the office. So that was Friday for them. The whole thing about decommissioning the Rebel fleet, in addition to the Imperial fleet, that's right out of the books. If you go and read the Alphabet Squadron trilogy or the Aftermath trilogy, they talk about how one of Mon Mothma's big projects after the Civil War ended, was to get rid of all the armies, basically, which seems like such a huge mistake in retrospect, especially considering how the First Order rises out of the ashes of the
Mhm.
Empire. But what were some of the other ones that you saw being picked
Oh,
up on?
I think it may have been Star Wars Theory. I think I
Okay.
caught they mentioned there was a gardens reference when
Yeah.
the droid pilot was taking him, and that was something that was from the publishing world. And then the what I'd seen on Twitter, the ones that you mentioned, especially the
Right.
mountain peak. So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's such a
I
cool
thought that was
idea.
cool. Yeah.
I love the whole I mean, I love this in the books too. They've mentioned Umate or Umate in the High Republic books when they're on Coruscant. And I just love this idea of the entire planet is covered by a city, except for this one really tall mountain peak that's like sticking out of the top. And you can only see like the top like 3 yards or 3 meters of it. Which is so I don't know, it is very kind of dystopian, but also very Star Warsy in a fun way. So I really liked all that stuff. One of the other things we should talk about is this character. Let's see, her name is um, Elia Kane, and we've seen her before as like a background character or side character in previous episodes, previous seasons of The Mandalorian on Moff Gideon's ship, and she was played by the actress named let me see here, Katie M. O'Brien, who's very good in this episode, and she's kind of the one who starts pulling Dr. Pershing back into pursuing his cloning research off the grid without official approval because it is against the law as his like parole droid tells him. But by the end of this episode, I think we're kind of left questioning who she's actually working for, because there's kind of a double cross. Because first we think, oh, she's kind of being a bad influence on him and leading him back down this dark path. And then when he gets arrested, we find out, oh, she was actually kind of entrapping him and working for the New Republic to kind of, see if anyone is willing to go along with this kind of thing. And then you bring them in to get mind flayed. But then at the very end, she's cranking up the dial on that mind flayer and maybe erasing his memory of all this cloning stuff. That's kind of how I read it, because we've found out I think they talk about in this episode how the mind flayer can erase your memory. So I don't know. What are your thoughts about this character? Who do you think that she's actually ultimately going to be working for? Is she still under the influence of Moff Gideon, you think?
It feels like she's an insider for Moff Gideon. That's how
Yeah.
I took it, and that she wanted to dump Pershing's memory, and she used this method because this also will more deeply ingratiate her with the powers that be, right? Because she's brought them this still uh, allied with against you. She's brought in this scientist who they thought they had helped integrate into the new system, and he actually isn't. So
Right.
she's done that, but yet ultimately, but how did they not know that she was the one who flayed his brain? I mean, it's like,
Right.
hey,
Exactly.
leave me alone with the guy for a
Yeah.
minute. They leave, and this happens. It's like,
Well, I made a joke on Twitter. I said like you would think the first rule of mind flaying would be don't leave the mind flayer unattended under while it's being operated. Like the guy just
yeah,
kind of wanders away and leaves her in there. I thought that was kind of a plot hole. Why he would ever leave somebody in there with that dial, even if you could trust them, even if because he knew she was supposed to be his friend, she might turn the dial down and not have him go through the process at all. You never know. You want to be there monitoring that machine while it's zapping somebody's brain. So that did seem odd to me. I don't know. What do you
and,
think?
well, yeah, and there's part of me that feels like her munching on that biscuit
Yeah.
at the end was like some hint as well. But I don't know how to interpret it. But maybe I'm
Hmm.
reading too much into it. I feel like I'm gonna find out that that's like Thrawn's favorite food or something, and I should have known that she was actually working for Thrawn because she was chewing on a biscuit.
I don't remember Thrawn loving biscuits in the book. He loves art. I don't remember the biscuit thing.
But see what Star Wars has done to me?
Everything's got to be connected. Yeah.
Looking for
So what do you
morsels.
think? So I would be very surprised if we got another like Dr. Pershing centric episode this season. I think this was probably the most time that we're going to spend with him. But what do you think is going to become of him? Do you think his brain is like totally fried now?
Ooh. Yeah, I kind
Yeah,
of do.
I
I kind
kind of
of
do
agree
too.
with you that we will just see him now. That if we do see him,
Yeah,
that he may be like just a kind of a simple
yeah,
drone type individual, thanks to
hmm,
what occurred. But
yeah.
um, yeah, so that's I agree. I'm not anticipating seeing more of him at all at all.
Okay.
In fact, I
Doobie
wouldn't even be
says,
surprised if he's just a throwaway line.
okay. Doobie says Dr. Pershing needs a spin-off. I don't know about that.
Judy
And then,
loves him. But this added to I know I had texted you while I was watching the episode that during that dog fight, I was
yeah,
having a hard time keeping my brain in Star Wars universe because Katie's voice was bringing me to Galactica. And then even
right.
like the diagnostic image of the
Yeah,
ships coming felt very much like when the Cylons would come. And there would just be so many, so many of them all the time. It was never a fair fight between Galactica and the Cylon. So I was very much in that mind. And then this guy, this Pershing, so reminds me of Baltar in that
oh
series,
yeah,
Galactica, and the set design and everything. So I just was really struggling to like kind of keep myself in a Star Wars frame of mind
yeah,
throughout it. But Kiki and Luca, I want to say that the purpose of destroying his brain was to obliterate whatever knowledge he had of the efforts, the cloning efforts that he
yeah.
had done, the efforts of Moff Gideon and team. I think that's the desire. I don't get the impression that this thing extracts information from your brain as much as it like
Right.
kind of wipes
Wipes
it.
it.
It's
Yeah,
it's it's not a download as much as like a chalkboard wiping.
yeah.
That's the impression I had.
I would agree with that. And I think the last thing that I want to say about this episode is one of my favorite tropes in television is when there's an interesting supporting character on a show and you get a whole episode about them. I was the first thing I was reminded of was my favorite show probably of all time and definitely when I was a teenager, The X-Files. There was the villain, the cigarette smoking man, and then season 4 early on they had an entire episode about his life and his private, thoughts and everything, and I absolutely love that episode. And this kind of brought me back to there. So I really like this idea. I actually would like to see them do this kind of thing more, and maybe that's the direction that they're going in. Maybe we'll get every once in a while they'll just kind of pick a character and we'll zoom in and see what they're up to for an episode. I wouldn't mind that at all if that's what these Star Wars stories became. It doesn't always, to me, The Mandalorian doesn't always have to be about Din and Grogu going on adventures together. As long as they're still around and we check in on them every once in a while. I don't know. Would you be opposed to that kind of thing, Rebecca?
No, if I'm ready for it. If
Yeah.
that's, if that's what I see kind of their pattern becomes, then I'm
Yeah.
adjusted to it and I'm good to go. An interesting thing that's out there kind of rumored and is that a lot of this storyline was
Yeah.
maybe something that we would have seen explored in the now canceled, right? It is officially like not on the
Yeah.
docket anymore, right? Was it Rangers of the New Republic was the
Yeah.
name of the series that was supposed to be led by Cara Dune?
I actually
Um,
did some research about that, and I found an interview that I had never seen before with Kathleen Kennedy from about a year ago, where she was quoted as saying, "Yeah, we've moved on from that show. The scripts had never really been written, but they had like ideas for it, and they are going to be incorporating those ideas into shows like The Mandalorian." So I think you're right on the money there. Yeah,
Yeah, so it feels like we're getting kind of that whatever story was going to be propelled by that series here, and I agree with you. And by the way, Confessions of also one of my more rewatched X-File episodes, so 100%
ah,
am
what a great
on board with
episode.
that. Just like I say, had to get my mind
Yeah.
realizing I'm not getting my chocolate. That's all. The dish I got was fantastic. It just wasn't
Okay.
chocolate.
Fantastic. Anything else you want to say about the convert before we move on?
No, I loved so many little things about this episode. The music in this episode was
Yeah.
great. I want those glowing popsicles to be available, either in
All
Tomorrowland
right.
or on Batuu. I
When you
love.
said that, I was trying to think about how you would do it. I guess the popsicle stick itself would have to be glowing because you can't make the food itself glow, or you wouldn't want to eat it, right?
Yeah, or maybe it could even be just a simple like ice, like a ice dish that
Yeah,
then was served in some sort of glowing container so that your ice
right.
would glow. Yeah. So yeah. But I want a glowing popsicle. That sounds fun. You apparently want the beverage. That's what jumped out at you.
I hadn't heard that phrase before. It was like fizzing something, and I looked it up after you said, "Isn't that already in Oga's?" Because you had seen it in the recipe book, the Galaxy's
Yeah.
Edge recipe book, but it's not a drink in Oga's. It says it's a Chef Cookie Tugs or whatever recipe. He's the guy who makes the food for Docking Bay 7. But this name of this drink actually originated in the old Droids cartoon from the mid 80s. So
Okay.
again, they're pulling from everywhere. I think this is the best thing to me about this era of Star Wars storytelling, especially the Mandoverse stuff, is they are willing to pull from the prequels, they're pulling from the sequels, definitely, and a lot of stuff from the original trilogy, and then a whole bunch of stuff from the Legends continuity, the books, the comics, the old cartoons, the new cartoons. It's just all of Star Wars mashed together, and that's what I really love the most about it. So I'm really digging it, looking forward to more. What else
Mhm.
are you looking forward to, Rebecca, from the remainder of season 3? There's let's see, 5 episodes left.
I am very interested to see what the realization that Mandalore is not cursed.
Hmm.
I'm eager to see where that leads. This sect that we have come upon. What will Bo's journey be? Will she fully, like what we were talking about earlier? I'm very much wanting a lot more of Mandalore culture and the exploration of the Mandalorian. And so I
Yep.
know, I hope that that's what I have ahead. If
I
I
think
don't, I'll be okay.
I,
I'll get over it.
I have a feeling we'll get more Mandalorian stuff.
Filoni's the writer on the next episode, right? Dave Filoni, I
Oh,
think.
is that next week? Yeah, you might be right about
I think it's next week. So there's a lot of anticipation
that. Okay.
that we will see a certain to
So
Ahsoka.
Gruta, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll
I could
see. We'll see. I suspect you may already know and can't say.
No,
So I will
I
say
don't
we'll
know.
see.
I don't know anything except
Okay.
for what I've seen in the trailers, which I know we're going back to Navarro at some point, and I know uh the let's see, that New Republic X-wing pilot guy whose name is escaping me, the Ranger captain, what's his name,
Oh,
is coming up. He's been in
yeah.
the trailer, and we haven't
Okay.
seen him yet in the show. That's really all that I know. So yeah, I have no idea. I will say I've been saying it every week, and I'm going to keep saying it until it happens. We need Boba Fett and Fennec Shan to pop up and get some screen time in exchange for what they what happened last year with the Book of Boba Fett. So hopefully that will happen sooner rather than later. We'll see. That's going to bring us to the end of our discussion of The Mandalorian this week, and to our final segment here on Who's the Bossk. It's called First Steps into a Larger World. This is where we talk about the media that we've been consuming and enjoying or not enjoying outside of Star Wars. My example this week, Ted Lasso is back, because there wasn't enough TV happening. There wasn't enough content to consume. Ted Lasso is a good show. It's very funny. It's very touching. It's on Apple TV Plus. It's about a soccer coach. Well, it's about a football coach from America who goes to London to coach soccer, and it's very charming. And I found this article about how the office of the villain this season was partially inspired by Palpatine's throne room in Return of the Jedi. So I thought that was a good Star Wars connection. How about you, Rebecca? I know you've been traveling, but have you had time to consume or read or watch or play anything?
Yeah, Doobie had me watch some movie. Doobie, what was the name of it? It was made by the same people. They had done this. It's not a found footage movie, but it's one of these where everything happens on the computer. The first one involved a
Oh,
a dad looking for his missing daughter.
okay.
And
I know
and
what
this
you're talking about. I don't know the title.
Yeah, I want to say it's called Missing, but I'm
Okay.
not 100%. Like I keep hoping Dewey's in the chat and he'll pop up with the name of it. But it is an absurd journey, but it was fun. Yeah, it is called Missing.
Okay.
So I enjoyed it. Like I say, it's unique in that it all happens right on a computer screen.
Mhm.
So all the footage is either like webcam or FaceTime style or that kind of thing. So intriguing in that way. Storyline is a bit predictable in some ways, and where it is not is absurd, but yet it's a fun ride. It's a popcorn flick, Mike. Popcorn flick.
I may check it out. That's a fun recommendation. Yeah, I have not seen it.
It's a ride. It's a fun ride.
A fun ride. Great. That's all you need is a fun ride. That's going to wrap it up for this week's episode of Who's the Bossk. Big thank you to my guest this week, Rebecca Mosley, the co-founder of Laughing Place. You can find her on Laughing Place on YouTube and what's going on over at Barely Necessities. You got one of those coming up this week? When's that?
Yeah, those are Tuesdays at 4 o'clock, and we take you all through what's available in the Disney World on shelves and what you can bring home.
Right. The Disney merchandise show, Barely Necessities, and the Laughing Place YouTube channel. Next week on Who's the Bossk, there's going to be 2 episodes again because I'm trying to get to 150. I need to get to 150 by my live show in London. So we've already recorded this next episode. It's the Mike and David Movie Club number 5. And then we will have another episode late next week discussing The Mandalorian and The Bad Batch episodes 4 and 14, respectively. My name is Mike Celestino. Thank you out there for listening or watching here on the Laughing Place YouTube channel. Appreciate it. And you can find me on Twitter at Who's the Bossk Pod. And as always, please visit laughingplace.com for all your Disney news and opinions. Thanks so much again. See you next time. Bye.